Since we haven't done a video in a while, I figured we would start off with one for Chapter 8. Now, as you can see, Chapter 8 is all about circles and area. So a lot of this should be familiar, but in case it's not, just follow along with me here. Now, when we look at circles, it's important that we understand the vocab that goes along with it. A circle itself is just created from a set of all points on a plane that are the same distance around a point called the center. So you can see right here, we have our center labeled C. Now, the radius is the distance from any point on the circle. So if I were to draw in a line from my outside of my circle to my center point, this could be a radius. I could also have a radius somewhere else on the circle as long as it's going from my middle point to the end of my circle. Ignore the fact that it's a bit squiggly. Now, as far as the diameter is concerned, the diameter is the distance across the circle through the center. So we are going from one end to the circle through that center point to the other. Again, ignore the fact that it's a little bit squiggly. Just like the radius, there are dozens of different diameters going through the circle at once, but the relationship between the diameter and radius is what's really important. If you look at the makeup of the radius versus that of the diameter, it's clear that the diameter is made up of two of our radii, or our radius makes up half the diameter. So these two equations down here are very important moving forward, especially when we start to get into the circumference. So the diameter of a circle is twice the radius r, so the diameter is equal to 2 times our radius, or the radius of the circle is 1/2 the diameter. So if we're trying to find our radius and we're given the diameter, we just divide that value by 2. So finding radius and diameter is pretty much just as easy as grabbing your calculator or just doubling or dividing whatever number is given to you in half. So if we're given the diameter of the circle shown, so we have our diameter of 20, it's asking us to find the radius. So if I go up to my equation, I know that the radius is equal to twice my diameter. So in order to find the radius, I take my diameter and divide it by 2. 20 divided by 2, of course, is 10, and make sure we put our units in of feet. It is going to be very important that we write units, so get in the habit of labeling them in your answer. Okay, now in the opposite direction, we're given the radius is 7 meters, and we're asked to find the diameter. So my diameter is equal to twice my radius, so I take 2 times 7 to get my final answer of 14 meters. Again, make sure your units are attached. So I'm not joking, it's really that easy, so go ahead and complete these bottom 2 examples, and you can even pause if you want to, and then check your answers with mine. Okay, so for letter C, you should have had that your diameter was 16, so to find a radius, divide it by 2 to get a final answer of 8 centimeters. And for the diameter for letter D, we had a radius of 9, so just double 9, and we end up with 8 yards as our diameter. Now, looking past the radius and diameter, we can look at other measurements within the circle itself. So if we want to talk about the distance around a circle, or really just the perimeter of a circle, then we're talking about the circle's circumference. Now, I'm sure you've seen the formula for the circumference of a circle either last year or earlier, but I want you to understand where these components are coming from. If you were to look at any circle, and even just looking at the circles on this page, a frisbee, a pool, a plate, a watch, or even a quarter, or I guess that's a nickel, look at any kind of circle and you can take the ratio between the circumference and its diameter and it'll give you the same exact number as long as all measurements are perfect. If we divide out the circumference from the diameter, you would actually end up with the value of pi, so 3.14159, and that's about as far as I can go. Because it's such an approximated number, it does go on forever, we're going to look at pi as 3.14. It's just be easier to plug into our calculators to make sure that everyone gets the same value. It is also estimated as about 22/7, and if you put it in your calculator, you'll see that it's pretty close to 3.14, but just like I said, so everyone's on the same page, we're going to stick to 3.14 whenever we're plugging into our formula. Now, coming from that idea that pi is equal to the circumference divided by the diameter, if we just manipulate the formula, we can actually solve for the circumference itself. So we have these 2 different formulas here depending on what we're given in our problem. So the circumference can be calculated either by the pi times our diameter, or we all know that the radius is twice the diameter, so our circumference can also be 2 times pi times r to accommodate for the fact that the radius is twice the diameter. Now, both equations work perfectly fine. It just really depends on what's given to you in the problem. So for example, if we're trying to find the circumference of the frisbee here, I see this 5 inches. Now, where the line is from the center to the end of the frisbee, I know that this 5 inches is my radius. So I'm going to pick that second formula there where the circumference is equal to 2 times pi times my radius, which in this case is 5. Now you're more than welcome to just plug this all into your calculator. Again, we are using 3.14 for pi, so if you just do 2 times 3.14 times 5, we're going to end up with a circumference of about 31.4 inches. Now, because we're talking distance, your unit should just be in inches or centimeters or feet. You shouldn't see any squared or cubes attached to your units. Okay, so if I look at this next one with the watch face, I can see this red line going across the watch itself. So I know that this 28 millimeters is really my diameter. So to find the circumference, I'm going to look at that first formula now. That circumference is equal to pi times my diameter, which in this case is 28, and still use 3.14. Again, it'll just save you some decimal places to deal with later. So my 3.14 times 28 is going to leave me with 87.92 millimeters. So when asked to find the circumference, just be careful about what value is actually given to you, whether it's the diameter or the radius. So go ahead and try these next three. Again, please be careful and make sure you include your units in your final answer. All right, so your final three circumferences are shown here. Again, make sure you have your units for each. A, you're using the radius, and B and C, you're using the diameter. So make sure your formulas followed suit. If you have any questions, especially on just circumference, please raise your hand and have me come over and go over them one more time with you before you move on to the last topic. Last up, we have the perimeter of a semicircular region. So you can see on the side here, we have this, what looks to be a half circle looking object, and they want us to find the perimeter. Now, you have to keep in mind that not only is a semicircle half of a circle, but when you're looking at the perimeter of it, remember, perimeter deals with the outside of the entire shape. So not only do we have the outside curved part, we also have this straight portion, which does count as the outside of the shape itself. So whenever we are calculating the perimeter of a semicircle, you first have to know, okay, what is that straight edge? Or it's really just the diameter, because it's showing the distance from one end to the circle to the other going through that center point. And then we have to think about, okay, well, what is half of that distance around the circle? Really just 1/2 of the circumference. So to find the distance around this semicircle, the first thing you want to do is figure out what half of the circumference would be if we were looking at a circle with a diameter of 6 meters. So to do so, I'm going to take that equation, which is my pi times my diameter, which in this case is 6, but I'm going to divide it by 2. I'm then going to make sure that I add in that diameter to account for the straight edge portion. So I'm going to add in my 6 meters. Now you can simplify first, or you can type this all into your calculator. If I do it in pieces, I know that my half circumference is calculated out to be 9.42, and then the last thing I have to do is add in my 6 for a final perimeter of 15.42, and in this case we're talking meters. It is very important that you do not forget to add in the diameter, so make sure after you do these 3 examples that you go back, double check, and make sure that you've added in whatever diameter is given to you in that problem. Okay, so I'm going to go through one more step by step, and then I'm going to just put in the answers for the other 2. So with this example, we have a semicircle with a diameter of 2 feet. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is calculate that half circumference, so my pi times my diameter, which is 2, and make sure I divide it by 2 because I am talking about half the circumference. But then I'm going to make sure I add in my diameter of 2. Again, I like to simplify as I go, so I know that my half circumference is going to be calculated out to 3.14, and then finally add in my 2 of my diameter, and I get 5.14 feet for my perimeter. Okay, so really not that difficult. You just really have to be careful, again, like I said, with that diameter being added into that half of the circumference. So go ahead and try the next 2. Be careful for C. Make sure you realize what value is this 15 inches. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, try these 2, and then hit play to check. Okay, for letter B, you should have gotten 17.99 centimeters, and even if those decimals are there, just leave them there, okay? That's why we're using that approximation of pi. And for C, you should have noticed that that was the radius, it wasn't the diameter. So whenever you go to add in that value to your perimeter, You should be actually adding in 30, not just 15. So your final answer should have been 77.1 inches.